switch powered the bare bulbs that were strung in a crisscross pattern overhead. They were the night security lights, and they kept the park dimly illuminated when the main lights were out. The third breaker controlled the electricity for elf headquarters, and that was permanently set in the on position. He'd told the electrician to rig it so that no misguided employee could cut the power to his television set in the middle of an important game. The music was blaring, as usual, and it seemed even louder now that it wasn't tempered by noisy crowds and the squeals of children riding the attractions. His trailer wasn't soundproof, but he'd learned to tune out the noise when he was inside. Now that the park was empty, the continuous loop of Christmas carols seemed ear-splitting. Silent Night was playing as he clicked on the overhead security lights. He'd learned his lesson the first night he'd spent in the park. Once the main lights were doused, it was impossible to see the second switch. He'd picked his way gingerly back to the trailer to get a flashlight to illuminate the second switch so that he could engage it. Larry reached for the top switch as the music went into the chorus. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is... He threw the switch and smiled. Not bright. Not bright at all, he said, heading back to the lights and warmth of elf headquarters. A big swallow from the brandy snifter on the coffee table made short work of his shivers. A second snifter took care of his icy toes and hands, and then he played channel roulette with the remote in an effort to find something interesting. He bypassed cooking shows, nature programs, reenactments of great moments in history, several movies with actors he didn't recognize, a performance by a symphony orchestra with a conductor he didn't recognize, and reruns of 10-year-old game shows. He finally concluded that there was nothing he really wanted to watch on any of his 200-plus satellite channels. The only thing that was slightly better than nothing at all was a replay of the championship college basketball tournament that had taken place last year. A few sips from a third snifter of brandy made it easier to pretend that he hadn't seen the game before. He watched a three-pointer sink in without even rippling the net, and then he looked up as car lights flashed outside his window. Someone was parking on the street, and it was probably Hannah and the dentist. No one else would come here this late. The sign on the gate announced that they were closed, but he'd left it unlocked so that she could come in. An envelope with her check and receipt was waiting on the table next to the door. He was nothing if not prepared. He picked up the platter she'd used for her plum pudding and glanced down at the remaining crumbs. She'd be pleased to hear that everyone had loved it, and agreed that it would be a big hit at the Crazy Elf cookie shop. When the knock came on the door, he was ready. He pulled it open, but when he saw who was standing there, he began to frown. "What are you doing here? You're the last person I expected to see." "I will be the last person you'll see." The words were clipped with anger. "It's what you deserve for what you've done." "What do you mean?" His frown deepened, and he stepped back in an effort to avoid a confrontation. It was clear that this was not a friendly social visit. His uninvited guest stepped in, shut the door, and took another step forward, forcing him to back up even further. "What do you want?" he asked. The answer to his question came in tangible form. When he saw the gun, he backed up several more steps and dropped the platter with a crash. His hands shot up in a futile effort to protect himself. "No, you can't," were the last words he spoke.